Hello and welcome to English Digest. I'm Seb.
And I'm Elsie.
And today we are looking at our topic-based writing assignment.
But wait, Seb, you don't sound... Are you in a bad mood?
I'm not in the best mood, to be honest. I didn't get a job offer that I really wanted to get.
Oh, that's too bad. I hope you'll feel better soon. And it's their loss.
It's their loss. I'm so great at what I do. But yeah, sometimes things don't go as planned. I'm sure they found somebody who was a better fit. And I think that the most important thing is to not feel disillusioned, not to feel like something isn't hopeless. It's not the end of the world. That's something that my mum would always say when I was a kid and I was feeling down. She would say, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
The world keeps turning. There's still plenty that you can do. It's never the end, right? So if you know, and another thing that she would say is, if at first you don't succeed, try and try again. So I can try again. I can see if I'll get a job somewhere else.
Yeah, just don't give up trying. And like I said, it's their loss, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I guess dealing with our emotions is very important, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
When I feel sad or disappointed, I go to the gym. Or if the weather is nice, I go hiking. What about you? How do you deal with your bad mood?
I think for me, the best coping mechanism, that's a way that you deal with something bad that happens to you, a way of dealing with your bad emotions, is, well, like you, I would go for a hike, normally a bike ride, actually. I like going down by the river in Taipei. That's a very nice place to do exercise. Mm-hmm. But also, it's very British of me, but a nice cup of tea.
Oh, nice.
Will really fix everything.
Yes.
So yeah, like that normally, it relaxes me. It gives me some time to think about things. And then I can think about how to move forward. So a nice cup of tea and a bike ride, basically. All right, so today we're going to be talking about, unfortunately, disappointment and things that have really let us down. So do you want to tell us a bit about our assignment, Elsie?
Sure. 这边的提示呢，给的是生命中难免会有令我们感到失望的事情，但无论情况再怎么不如预期，我们总都要面对它，面对现实，并且调试自己的心情。请你写一篇短文描述最令你感到失望的一件事情，文分两段，第一段描述这件事情的始末，第二段描述事发之后你如何面对失落，重整情绪。那文长至少是120个单词。
So the assignment says there will inevitably be disappointments in life. But no matter how bad the situation is, we always have to face reality and take things as they come. Write a short essay describing one of the most disappointing times in your life. The article is divided into 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph describes what the disappointing event was. And the second paragraph should be about how you dealt with the situation and how your feelings were about it after the incident. You should write at least 120 words. Okay, so a couple of really useful words there. The first one is inevitably. There will inevitably be disappointments in life. So when something is inevitable, it means it's unavoidable. It happens to everyone and it always happens eventually. So there's a really famous quote which says something like, 2 things are inevitable in life: death and taxes. So everybody has, those 2 things happen to everybody. You always have to pay taxes and everyone dies. That's just life. Those are inevitable things.
Inevitable 就是无可避免的，好，不能够避掉的。
Exactly.
好，再来到 develop and approach 这边，我们今天要写的是叙述文。那什么是叙述文呢？来复习一下吧。叙述文是一种运用非常广泛的文体，常出现在大考的作文题目当中。常见的类型有：第一种描述经验或事件，第二种描述物品，第三种描述人物。那我们今天要写的作文呢，它重于描述经验，是描述经验的叙述文。
Exactly. So what we have here basically is a narrative essay. In English, we call English narrative is 叙述文. Well, in Chinese, I should say, is 叙述文. So a narrative is basically a fancy word for a story. Narratives are basically telling what happened to a person, an object, or during an event, or even talking about something that happened to yourself, all of which happened in the past. So basically, we're telling a story about a thing. And today, we're telling a story about disappointment. So you're going to want to structure your narrative properly. A narrative essay is a story that makes a main point. And today, we're going to be writing quite a personal story. And the point of the story is going to tell the reader what disappointed you and how you felt afterward. So those should be the main themes of your writing.
好，再来，我们叙述文要怎么写，写什么？英文作文的架构一样，我们分为引言 （introduction）、主体 body 还有结论 conclusion。那本篇叙述文也是以这样的架构来发展。Introduction 是文章的引言，说明文章要探讨的主题或动机。全文的主旨句，也就是 thesis statement， 常在这边就点出来。那在描述经验的文章当中 ，Introduction 除了可以如本次基础范文直接破题以外，还有以下几种的写法。第一个，在经验发生之前，你对此经验抱持是什么样的看法？第二个，一般人对此经验的看法，好像是我们进阶范文就是用这样子的手法开头的。再来第三个，这个经验对你个人的意义是什么呢？
Right. We've talked about this a couple of times before. You should structure your stories like a hamburger. So why do I say a hamburger? Well, because hamburgers have three main parts, right? They have a top bun, the meat, and the bottom bun. So your top bun is your introduction. It's going to set the scene of the story. It's going to tell you the basic information about your characters, kind of set up the events. In this case, it's going to talk about the disappointment, maybe the thing that you were looking forward to, and the thing that didn't happen. Then afterwards, we're going to move on to the meat, and that's going to be the body of the story, the disappointing event itself, how this made you feel, what it meant for things to not work out this way. Maybe, maybe a conversation you had about how you felt disappointed with a parent or with a friend. Those could all be things that you could talk about. And then the bottom piece, the bottom part of the bun is your conclusion. So in this case, what did you learn from the experience? How did this turn into a good experience for you? And how did it teach you a lesson about disappointments and about life?
好，再来呢 body 是文章的主体，我们必须叙述许多相关的细节，也就是 supporting details。细节必须和主题相关，要使主题生动，让人家印象深刻。那在叙述整个经验的过程当中，可以依照事件发生的时间顺序来描述，也可以用倒叙法，要特别注意时态的一致性。以下为描述经验的时候常出现的细节。第一个，何时发生？When 何地发生 Where 谁是参与者也就是 Who 那为什么会发生呢用到的就是 Why 如何发生用到的就是 How 再来是事件如何收场结果是什么 The result 是什么 Consequence 是什么好可以把它写出来再来第四个事情发生中或发生后你的感受感觉是如何 How you felt 好这个部分也是很重要的
Right, I really love for reviewing your story, perhaps after brainstorming, to use the 5Ws 1H. And that's why I really like that you talked about when, where, who, why, and how, because those are the 5Ws 1H. And what, we forgot about what. So why would we use this in a story? Because normally we use this for news. But 5Ws 1H basically gets you to ask these questions. Where did it happen? How did it happen? Who did it happen to? And if you can answer all these questions with your story, then your story is complete. If you can't answer it with your story, then you're missing details. And by showing all of these things, the reader is going to have a complete idea of the story you're telling, which is very important. So use this as a checking device when you are planning out your essay. All right, so next we have the conclusion, don't we?
好 conclusion 呢是文章的结论在描述经验的文章当中可以说明这一次事件给了自己什么样的启示自己有什么样的体会对自己有什么样的改变或影响
Right. So once we've got our conclusion, we have a nice completed story. So for today's brainstorming exercise, we are going to basically work out a timeline of the events of what happened that led up to this disappointment and that and what followed afterwards. So what is a timeline? Basically, a timeline is a sequence of events. Normally, it is represented on a horizontal line, which is why we call it a timeline. And it basically, yes, plots out some things that happen between A and B. So I often use timelines actually when I'm proposing some work or doing a work plan because it shows the steps that I'm going to do to achieve something. So you can use this in planning projects, but you can also do it in telling stories as well. So, yeah, because stories are narratives, aren't they? They tell what happened in the past. That's what they're about. So let's take a closer look at today's outline.
OK， 那再补充说明一下哦，在书写经验的写作当中啊，我们经常会使用顺序法，就是依照事件发生的时间顺序来描述其完整的历程。那我们今天看到的这个图表，我们有1、2、3、4、5、6 6 parts, right? 6 periods of time. 所以第一个是 My class had an English test. 再来 number 2, I felt good because I had done great on all my previous tests. 3, I was shocked when I got the test back. 好，所以每一件事情都是按照它发生的时间顺序来做组合的。
Exactly. And then it goes on to say, it was my lowest grade that semester. I cried a little, and later I realized the bad grade was an important lesson for me. So actually, if we look at this timeline, you could actually make this a 6-paragraph essay, which you don't have time for in this test, but that's what we're getting here. We have the first paragraph, my class had an English test, which is describing the background to the story. The second paragraph talks about why the person is confident and why they're expecting to do well. The third paragraph is the twist, the juan, that in this story where we're suddenly talking about how things didn't go as expected. It was my lowest grade that semester. So I thought I was going to do really well, but I did very poorly. So if you were making this a whole paragraph, you could talk a lot more about, what happened and your feelings when you saw it, maybe what your test looked like. Was it covered in red ink? Did the teacher write something angry at the top saying, you should study harder? Those are things you could include here. And then 5 talks about the reaction, the person's reaction, and 6 talks about the moral of the story. So later I realized the bad grade was an important lesson for me, that I should study harder. So we get a very complete story here. Next, once we have all of our events out, we need to work on planning our outline, don't we?
是的，我们要到 make an outline 的地方。写作前的架构是非常重要的，这个我们都知道。那好的架构会帮助你在写作的时候有清晰的思路，也避免漏写或是写入太多不必要的资讯。
Right, outlines will help you organize your ideas by planning things out in a bulleted list that will let you know what you're going to be writing about and, what you need to talk about in your story. And the reason we do these is they help us organize our time efficiently and make sure that we don't write too much about one thing and not enough about another. Now, I will say one thing about outlines is that they're not fixed. You can make an outline and then you can start writing something and realize that you want to make some changes. So, for example, I was telling you about my big writing project in the other episode, and I have got a new outline and I'm working on it. And yesterday I was writing all day, and I got towards the end of my outline and realized actually my last point is not very important. Like it can be a minor point in my second paragraph. It doesn't need to be its whole own section. So if you're writing through it and you realize, oh, my first point is really interesting, I want to say a lot of things, and I want to expand it, and my third point isn't, you can change it. You can change it to reflect what you think is most important. However, planning things out will give you a good idea of what you're going to talk about. So it's good to do it first anyway. So let's take a look at today's outline. we've got a list with our topic sentence, the main point that we're making with the paragraph, and then 5 supporting sub-points. So the first one says, a disappointing thing happened last semester, right? So we're setting it up immediately by letting the reader know that something that we didn't want to happen happened to us, or something our expectations weren't met. My class had an English test. I felt good because I had gotten good grades on all my previous tests. So these first 2 points basically they set us up for disappointment because they're talking about the person's confidence, why they expect to do very well, why they think that they are great at English. Obviously, if they expected to do poorly, this wouldn't be such a disappointing experience, but they expected to do well, and so that's emphasized at this point in the outline. Then the second 3 points are, I was so shocked when I got my first grade. I was so shocked when I got my grade. It was the lowest grade that semester, and I cried a little. So here we have the shock, we have the low grade, and we have the sad reaction. So we can see that this person is very upset, but also very surprised by the outcome of the test. So that gives us a very strong start to our essay, and it responds very well to the question or to the assignment that we were given at the beginning of this episode. What do we see in the second paragraph, Elsie?
OK， 所以在第一段当中呢，依照时间的顺序去写出这一些发生的事件，再来就要到第二段了。那第二段我们看到的 topic sentence， 也就是主题句是 When I recovered, I realized the bad grade was an important lesson for me. 好，带出自己的想法感受。A, I had been too confident. B, I hadn't prepared for the test properly. 好，这个是自己的反思反省。再来 C, I felt thankful to learn that before taking more important tests later. 那接下来呢，就会到我们的结论句 conclusion 的地方哦。这边的结论句是The disappointment hurt, but it taught me to work hard.
Yes, that is a good moral to learn from the story. And we actually have an expression in English, don't count your chickens before they hatch. And that is something which really resonates with me as I read this outline. So don't count your chickens before they hatch basically means you can't depend on something that hasn't happened yet. So you can't say, I'm going to get a great grade in my English test because I'm good at English. Because you haven't got the grade yet. You haven't taken the test yet. You don't know what the test will be like. We could also say, don't rest on your laurels, which is don't rely on the things that you know you're good at. You know, assume that there's going to be challenges and be ready to take on those challenges when they come up. All right, let's take a break here and then let's look at our basic sample. Basic sample. The most disappointing thing that has ever happened to me occurred last semester. My class had just taken an English test. I was feeling pretty good about it, as I had gotten good grades on all my previous English tests. What's more, I was generally considered one of the top students in my English class. However, when I got my test grade back, my jaw dropped. I hadn't failed, but it was my lowest grade of the semester. I don't mind admitting that I cried a little. However, when I recovered from the shock, I realized the poor test grade was an important lesson for me. It showed me I'd become overconfident, and I hadn't prepared for the test properly. After reflecting on it for a few days, I was thankful I'd learned this lesson before taking some of the more important exams later in the year. The disappointment hurt, but it reminded me to always work hard. Right, he was reminded not to count his chickens before they hatched, basically.
好，那这边我们看到很多很好的用法，像是发生除了用 happened 之外呢，我们还可以用occurred。 好，还有就是下颚掉下来是什么意思？就是表示很惊讶。My jaw dropped. My jaw dropped. 好，接下去呢，还有一个是不介意做某事，我们可以说 don't mind doing something， 记得后面要用的是 VING 的形式，像是他说 I don't mind admitting that I cried a little， 我不介意承认自己是有小哭了一下。好，接下来说从惊讶当中平复过来 recovered from the shock。
Right, recovered from the shock, so got over the bad experience. So I think one word that I think is really good in this base example is the word overconfident. So when someone is overconfident, they feeling confident is good, right? It's having 自信. It's feeling good about yourself and feeling good about what you can do. If you're overconfident, you're too confident. You might not take things seriously. You might not think about a test as being as needing much of your attention, needing much preparation. If you're overconfident, you don't prepare properly. And that's what this story is about. It's about somebody not preparing properly because they assumed they would definitely do well. So an even more negative way of saying overconfident is big-headed. When someone is big-headed, that means they have a big ego, they think a lot of themselves, and they might be disrespectful or rude to other people because of that. They're big-headed. All right, let's move on now to the advanced sample. Advanced sample. Everybody encounters disappointment at some point in their lives. While it's never a nice feeling, there's something to be learned from these letdowns. While I've been disappointed any number of times, one particular memorable incident took place earlier this year when I took my driving test. I'd done a lot of hard work preparing for it. I'd taken lessons, watched online tutorials, and practiced with my parents. I felt that I was ready. However, as soon as the test got underway, I panicked. It was like my mind was being gripped by ice-cold hands. I forgot everything I was supposed to do, and my physical movements, which had been so smooth in practice, were suddenly jerky and uncontrolled. I gripped the steering wheel so hard that I almost broke it. Needless to say, I failed the test. I was crushed. But after a few days of reflection, I had a revelation. If that was how I reacted in a test, was I ready for all the pressures of real-life driving? Of course I wasn't. If I suffered that kind of anxiety attack while behind the wheel, I could present a danger to myself and others. Failing the test was a massive disappointment, but it showed me that not only did I need more practice, but I also had to find a way to handle my nerves. In fact, failing my first driving test made me an overall better driver in the end, since calm, relaxed drivers make nowhere near as many mistakes. Okay, so a lot of great things to learn from this story. Sometimes when things don't work out, it's for the right reasons, and we can actually learn something from the experience. I actually resonate with this, with both of these samples, or they resonate with me, because when I took my driving test in Taiwan, I thought I was definitely going to pass it because I already had a driver's license in the UK, and I'd been driving for a while, and I'd even driven a scooter before in other countries, so I thought I'm definitely going to do this. But when I went to do the test, I got really nervous. I don't know why. I felt very pressured to do well in the moment. And so I started to overthink things. I started to think about things too much. And then I started making lots of silly mistakes.
But in Taiwan, it's like a parking test instead of a driving test. You have to park so many times during the test, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's not easy. So you didn't pass the first time.
Or the second time. Or the third time. But I passed the fourth time.
That's good. Actually, same thing happened to my husband.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he thought he could pass, but no.
The third time was the funniest because I actually had done everything perfectly, but I thought I'd finished the test already, so I just drove off the course. And the guy said, you failed. So
come back.
I was so angry with myself. I almost broke the scooter.
Okay.
But yeah, so we do get disappointing things happen to us like that, especially when we're overconfident, right? But also when we put too much pressure on ourselves. I was talking about overthinking, and we can see overthinking be represented in this sample. We have, where is it? As soon as I took the test, it felt like my mind was being gripped by ice-cold hands, right? The person's mind went blank. They couldn't think, and they were so stressed that they weren't thinking clearly. They weren't, remembering the things that they should do. And that is really a case of somebody buckling under pressure or overthinking what they need to do in the moment. So, yeah, that you need to relax as well. It's not just about preparing, it's also about remaining calm in the moment.
Yeah, don't stress yourself out too much.
Exactly. What's some good vocab that we can take away from this sample?
Okay, there's some grammar points I want to point out. Like number one, any 这个字啊，在这边有出现。我们看到的是 any number of something， 这个代表的是许多大量哦，哈，因为通常我们可能看到 a number of something or a large number of something， 但是这边用的是any， 因为 any 这个字啊，在这边强调的是数量或是程度上，多到没有办法明确指出有多少。
And I think one last word which I want us to point out before we finish is let down. So let down is one word, even though it's made of two, let and down, and it basically means disappointment. A letdown is something that really spoils your mood, that makes you feel upset. So thinking that you're going to get your driving license that day and then not getting it is a letdown. You probably made plans with your friends. You're going to do lots of great things, and you didn't. You can't do those things now because you didn't pass the test. I imagine that for your husband, failing the driving test was a real letdown, right?
Right, a real letdown.
Yes.
Okay,
but what we've learned from today's assignment is even though life hands us letdowns sometimes, there's normally something we can learn from the experience, and there's normally a way of moving forward that's going to make us better, stronger people as a result.
Right. So, learn from your past mistake, but don't give up. Keep trying.
Yes. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, and let your chickens teach you lessons about life.
Yeah, that sounds okay.
It sounds okay. End on a strong note. All right, I'm Seb.
I'm Elsie.
And we will see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.